regardless of which class of people you belong to, the fact is loud and clear that the government can stop the internet. And tomorrow, if even if it's a different government, there might be a different issue. But a lot of people, especially the young generation, who are kind of internet native, who have never seen a world without internet, for many of them, it's probably the first time that they have seen that, oh, something like this can happen. And I'm sure there's a big percentage of those people who will think about it, that what will I do if it happens next.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Bitcoin Politics. My name is Frank Corva. I'm the political correspondent for Bitcoin Magazine, joined today by Hash. So Hash is an alumni of the MIT Bitcoin Club, and he also has a startup in food technology. We're going to be focusing maybe a little bit more on his involvement with Bitcoin and maybe freedom tech more broadly. I had the pleasure of meeting Hash this year at the MIT Freedom Tech Expo, which was a few months back. But Hash also has some knowledge and some insights into what happened in Nepal 2 weeks ago, what happened with this adoption of Bitchat on the ground in Nepal, and also Bitcoin and some other freedom technology, including Nostr. But before we dive into that, Hash, I was hoping you could maybe just introduce yourself a little bit, tell us a little bit about your involvement at MIT, and then also where you're from in India, how that's near Nepal, and maybe your experience with Nepal.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. Happy to be here on this podcast. I've been a listener all these days and years, and glad to be on it with you. So, my quick intro is I go by Hash, and I got involved with Bitcoin because of the MIT Bitcoin Club, which I joined back in 2017 as a grad student on campus. And since then, I'm someone who I love libertarian politics mindset. That's my political alignment, and always saw Bitcoin more as a tool for freedom tech than anything else. And that's more or less the mindset at the Bitcoin Club as well traditionally. So last year. I moved back to Boston after staying for in San Francisco for a couple of years, and the theme for this year's expo was, we were talking about what should be the theme, and we got introduced to the Human Rights Foundation folks, and we realized that, okay, this is something that we need to bring out, these stories of activists all over the world who are using Bitcoin to transfer funds and run their operations, fighting these oppressive regimes in countries like Venezuela, Russia, and almost all over the place. So that kind of is something that I got really excited about, and I ended up leading the organization of the expo with Adam as my co-director last year. So because of my interest in this space, I keep following these global news, especially from the freedom tech lens. And the recent developments in Nepal, for example, it's close to home. And I grew up in the state of Bihar in India, which borders with Nepal. And my sorry, my ancestor village is literally like an hour drive away from the Nepal border. So I've been visiting every time I go back to India. Almost every time I visit Nepal, go to Birganj, Pokhara, Kathmandu, all these places, have a lot of friends there. So I stay in touch with them. So have been monitoring the developments in Nepal, that there have been some interesting stories. So happy to share with you guys, just to make sure I was not personally present in Nepal when these things happened. So it's anything I say on this podcast is based on what I've heard from people who were actually present there on the ground.
Yeah, so I want to give a little context there as well. So I had posted something on social media, and I'm not sure if you saw it on my Nostr or my X account, where I said, "Hey, I'm looking to speak with people on the ground. Wanted to know more about what adoption of freedom tech like BitChat, which we'll describe in just a second, what it actually looked like." Because sometimes I think sometimes there's some hyperbole. Maybe some people say maybe the adoption was bigger than it was. So I always like to find out what the reality is. Hash responded to me. He tried to put me in touch with some of his friends, one woman in particular, who I believe is an activist and a social worker on the ground, who was there for the protests, if I'm not mistaken. So I think
Yeah.
a lot of people felt, I believe, nervous to speak about what's happening there. And I don't blame them. I don't know whether they might become targets for the government, or it's obviously quite an anxiety inducing thing, speaking about what just happened in a protest that you were a part of. So we have Hash kind of serving as a proxy for someone who can relay some of this information that he's learned from people on the ground, which we deeply appreciate. So if we wouldn't mind maybe starting there, maybe starting with what your friend, the one that I was, you tried to put me in touch with, told you, and whatever else you've learned from what the experience was actually like for people during these. I mean, maybe you can also just give us an overview of what occurred and what the results of the protests were.
Yeah. This will be a long answer. I'll just go in chronological order, and based on what I've heard from people is this protest. It appeared like it was it happened in the spur of the moment, but it looks like things were brewing for a long time, and going back to since there have been major earthquakes in Nepal, the economy has not been a great shape, and historically Nepal has now become like a country of migrants, and the youth usually when they grow up, if you actually travel to Nepal, you will see so many boards of institutes that promote study in Japan, study in Australia, or like migrate to New Zealand, and like all these places, and it feels like it has become the base of the economy. Even if you look at the numbers, I was just reading something on Wikipedia. It looks like a third of their GDP is remittance that comes from outside the country. So
Mm,
Nepalis who have left the country, gone outside, they make money there and they send it back home to their families. That's like a third of the economy. So things have not been in good shape, and at the same time, there has been a lot of backlash against nepotism in the government. So kids of rich people and influential people, particularly in politics, have disproportionate um, assets and privileges which the general public was not happy with. And in the recent months there have been a lot of posts on social media about nepo kids. So nepotism, abbreviated as nepo, and nepo babies or nepo kids. And on TikTok in particular, that was like a trending hashtag. And all this has been going on over the last few months. And then the government comes up with this ban on social media. So I don't know what the reality is, but a lot of people saw an interconnection that the government is trying to suppress this content that's brewing on social media, and that is why they are blocking the social media.
right.
While
Just if I could quickly jump in there. Yeah, I reported on this a little bit. There was a lot of
Mhm.
reporting saying that the protests happened because of this maybe internet blackout, social media blackout. These 26 major social media sites were shut down, including all of the major ones, Facebook,
Yeah.
Instagram, all of that. But the reality was, it wasn't just randomly that it was decided that they were going to be shut down. It's because we had this Nepo Kids movement. We had the everyday people in Nepal voicing their discontent for these wealthy children of maybe politicians, bureaucrats, showing them, shopping at fancy stores and spending their money in fancy outlets. So it wasn't just this random overnight, let's shut the internet down. It's let's shut the internet down because people are exposing some sort of corruption, right? And we're trying to stop. We're essentially trying to suppress this information from spreading.
Yeah, yeah. And so that happened. And um, when the social media accounts were blocked, so again, it's not we have to see it in the context of the social impact and also the economical impact. So for a lot of youth, making reels, posting it on Instagram and TikTok, they actually get paid for it. And
Mm,
it's not just about gaining followers for the sake of gaining followers. It's for a lot of people, it's actually becoming a source of money.
yeah.
So that's why the ban hit even harder for those people. So and there's a high rate of unemployment, so the youth just didn't know, okay, what do we do now? So there's one organization. So that's what happened in building up the context of like when the movement started. And then the other piece is which I looked at when I spoke with all these people, is how centralized or decentralized these protests were. So it looks like things started pretty much centralized with one big organization, which is Hami Nepal. And I'm sure by this time you must be aware of them. They are a social organization. They started in 2015. Primarily, they help people who suffer from natural calamities, which is very frequent in Nepal, like floods or earthquakes and all those things. So it's an NGO, non-government organization, that they are pretty much transparent, but they have a huge following on social media.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people who follow them. Their founder, his name is I think Sudan Gurung. So I mean, they never called for violent protest or anything, but they did encourage people to for peaceful protest, and giving them instructions such as what should you carry to these protest site. Okay, these are protest sites, and you should be peaceful, but you should make sure you have a bag with you, you carry some water bottles with you, and things like that. So that's how the protest started. And then it turns out that once there is a gathering of a lot of people, and of course there were volunteers from Hami Nepal who were trying to guide people, but it wasn't still like a centralized leadership that like there's one leader who is on the stage and people are just following them. It was more like a protest, and everyone is like acting as an individual there. And then things started going out of hand. At that point,
Hmm.
the security forces used force, which led to deaths. Like I think the first few days, 13 or 14 people died, and then
Right.
overall it's like 20 plus is the official estimate. I'm pretty sure the actual numbers will be a lot higher,
More.
which is always the case. So so once the protests became violent and people started dying, getting killed in those protests, that basically added fuel to the fire. And then it started becoming more decentralized and getting out of hand and spreading all over the country. So even smaller cities, like I had friends in Pokhara, yeah, and I was talking to her, and even there the protests were very serious, and people were out on the street. She just sent me a picture of her daughter putting candles on the street. So now that the protests are over, they are actually making like Nepal's flag, and on the street, putting candles around it, and they're cleaning up things. So all that is happening. But yeah, so at that point it became kind of all over Nepal. And the most interesting piece that I noticed about this, that throughout this, the internet was not completely blocked by the government, and that surprised me, because back in India, when things go out of hand, the first thing that the government does is block internet,
Hmm.
block even SMS, like even phone signals in some cases.
Hmm.
They put curfew, and that's how they do like block protests. But in case of Nepal, that never happened. At least in Pokhara. Maybe it happened in Kathmandu, but even if it happened for a very short period of time.
Okay.
And I started asking, like, why was that the case? Like, why did they not just block the internet for a couple of days so that no one would be able to communicate? And it turns out the answer is that the economy is so much dependent on these remittances coming from outside. Like, if they block the internet,
Hmm.
it would completely cripple the economy, and things would even become harder to manage.
Wow.
So they didn't dare do that. So that led me to about this whole thing about, okay, what were the applications and what sort of technology was used in these protests. And it turns out it was still largely internet based.
Okay.
So something like Bitchat, and I was again looking into Bitchat, and a lot of people downloaded Bitchat. I see like the number from App Store numbers are like close to 50,000 downloads
Right.
in a couple of days.
Yep.
But if you look at the numbers, Nepali population is close to 30 million.
Right.
And if you look at the number of Gen Z, people born after 97, 98, and till like few years ago, so this generation is close to 12 million. That's
Got it.
as per Wikipedia.
Yep.
So if you think of 12 million, assuming let's say half of Gen Z actually participated in the protest, because I won't assume that everyone did.
Right.
So that brings us to 6 million. So 50,000 people is like less than 1% of 6 million.
Right.
So it's not a lot. Although it tells us that people were prepared, that if the internet is blocked, we have this backup. And
Could
thanks to Jack Dorsey.
Could I, yeah,
So,
could I stop you
yeah.
there for a minute? Do you have
Mhm.
any understanding of, so yes, 50,000 is only 1% of 6 million, but it's still 50,000 people who knew about this or who at least found out
Mhm.
about it, which is a pretty large number, I would say,
Yeah.
generally speaking. how did the word about it spread? Who was the first person to say Bitchat, or where did because I mean this is very new technology. This was
Yeah,
created literally like weeks or months ago.
yeah.
So like how did the word about Bitchat spread?
I That's a good question. My honest answer is I don't know how it
Okay.
started. BitChat. The people I asked personally, I asked like four of them. None of them used BitChat,
Okay.
and most of them, like three out of these four, didn't even know about BitChat,
Okay.
and they said they were mostly using Discord primarily.
For
And
community, like for text communication, just like as like just message person to person, or maybe
no,
in
just
rooms.
for like, okay, where is the protest happening? Where are
Got
we
it.
going to
Got
show
it.
up tomorrow?
Got it.
What's
Got
going
it.
on there? So
Yep.
so Discord was the biggest platform that everyone used,
Okay.
and BitChat, it looks like a group of some people who were, again, your question is making me think it's probably people who were more aware of these kind of technologies.
Got it.
I'm guessing they probably downloaded it as a backup, and
Mm,
they were ready to use it if there was a complete internet blackout. But since internet was there, so adoption of um, your Discord and WhatsApp was already there. People were
got it.
already using it, so
Okay.
they became more popular.
Yep.
Also, another thing is about the VPN usage also shot up highly. Like, I was reading some data about like 6,000% increase in VPN installation. So a lot of people were also using VPN.
Okay.
Yeah,
Understood. So there were some people using BitChat, not a huge number.
yeah,
First, I read some stories about remittances coming in through things like Bitcoin, because otherwise,
hmm,
to get money into the country to help fund these protests, or at least fund some of the protesters, it would have taken longer to use something like Western Union. Is that technology commonly used there, or was something like Bitcoin for that purpose a relatively newly introduced entity or a newly introduced idea to most people? Are people familiar with this tech? Are the youth using it to begin with, or was this relatively
yeah.
new?
So people who are into activism, they are definitely 100% aware of Bitcoin, and
Got it.
they use it. But for the general people, the masses, Bitcoin is not there in Nepal yet.
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay. So for those people who are using it, if they are getting some Bitcoin, I'm assuming they have to then transfer it into a local currency and use it. It's not like all of
yeah,
a sudden some sort of Bitcoin
yeah,
circular economy is forming.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. When it comes to now, what I love seeing on social media is like it's such a testament to Nepali culture. I feel like you have people, the protesters, or at least people in the country, cleaning up, after the
Yeah.
protest. There seems to be a rebuilding vibe. Now, maybe that's very manicured for someone like me from outside to see, but it wouldn't surprise me at the same time. So there's going to be some effort to rebuild now. We have an interim prime minister.
Mhm.
Actually, before I get to that question, let's stop there for a minute. So we had this vote that took place on Discord to get the
Mhm.
interim prime minister into office. How fair do you think this ended up being? Who was voting? If you were Nepali, maybe you had citizenship, but you were outside the country. Were you voting? How many people voted? What sorts of details do you have on that?
Yeah, that's where the conspiracy theories come in
Okay, let's touch
come
on
into
those
play.
then.
Like,
Yeah,
who was actually controlling the strings? And I saw some news reports about Hami Nepal and how they have received funds from American companies like Coca-Cola, and they list everyone on their website. So I read this news report, but then when I went to their website, I saw, okay, there are like so many other companies, and it's not just Coca-Cola. So you cannot really point out that, okay, they are just receiving funds from American companies. They're receiving funds from everyone.
yeah.
So it doesn't make a strong case there. But coming back to this voting thing, um, there was a brief period of time when this prime minister who was recommended was even rejected by a certain segment of the crowd, and they said, okay,
Okay.
we don't accept her as a PM. And then
Mm.
after some time, it looked like there was a consensus among the people. So yeah, again, it's not the way democracies should be run, for sure. Taking votes on Discord, but hey, it's Gen Z. Uh,
Right.
it's maybe tomorrow, if someone can actually build these systems powered by Bitcoin, maybe as a foundation layer, where you can have these votings done. And I know there have been experiments around this.
We've
I
had
think
so
that's the future.
I think so. I think you might be alluding to simple proof, where the outcomes for a vote. could be even pencil and paper voting, where those documents essentially get uploaded into the op return function of Bitcoin. They get
Yeah.
preserved on paper. It does seem like we're in the early days, though. We have had presidential elections in the United States that have used this. We had a presidential election in the full presidential election countrywide in Guatemala used that, I
Oh
think,
wow.
2 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah. It
Okay.
seems like this wasn't the perfect opportunity for that. Like something needed to be done a
Yeah.
little bit more quickly. And also, there's still issues with that where you still have to sort of do things to preserve the actual integrity of the vote on Bitcoin right
Mhm.
now. The documents that get preserved, the integrity of those documents can still be in question. It's not that
Yeah.
Bitcoin itself makes all the documents; it just protects those documents once they've been created. So I think
Yeah.
we're not quite there, but I think it's probably something to think about for sure. At the same time, it seemed like people seemed happy enough with this vote. I've read about the woman. I think it's the first female prime
Yeah.
minister in Nepal's
Right.
history, which is
Right.
exciting. She seems very legit. I thought they were going to elect like some 22-year-old who's like, I'll be the prime minister now. So it seemed like, as
Yeah.
you put it, consensus was reached, but it was reached in a way. It was using a new technology. It was reached in a way where it doesn't seem like people are fighting over it, and she seems like a pretty legit candidate, pretty
Hmm.
legit person to
Yeah.
become prime
Yeah.
minister. Do you have any insights into that?
I everyone I've spoken with, actually they all like her, and
Okay.
many of them like her. I don't know how to say it without making it controversial, but because she's the first female prime minister also, so that's also a factor. Like
Okay.
because she's female,
Got it.
so that's something that a lot of people like. Nepal, so Nepali society is very conservative in terms of,
Okay.
it's still better than some pockets of India, I believe, but still, there is a lot of restrictions. There is a lot of human trafficking involving Nepalese women that still happens till date,
Got it.
and the government have tried to build a lot of protection. Like if you are a single Nepali woman trying to leave the country, the paperwork you have to go through is a lot harder than if you are a male. And the
Okay.
reason is, of course, these are designed to protect women, but the sad reality is that women still need to be protected, and in these situations.
Understood.
So with that context, like having a first female prime minister is a really big deal for Nepal. A lot of people in the younger generation are excited and happy about that.
Okay.
She has also been in public life for some time, and she has like proven her administrative skills. So although didn't discuss those things specifically, but it looks like she is good. She might turn out to be a good administrator as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Cool. That's great to hear. I want to go back to one point you made about activists understanding Bitcoin, maybe some other freedom tech tools. So, your friend who is an activist slash social worker, was she familiar with these tools? Like, let's say things
No,
went on. Okay.
this friend doesn't like, actually doesn't like Bitcoin, and honestly speaking, there's a lot of left leaning people with left ideology who still think Bitcoin is like a capitalistic tool,
Got it.
and they are not very comfortable with it yet. Yeah,
Understood. Yeah, that makes sense. I
yeah,
totally get that, and I appreciate the honesty. I think what I was trying to get to with this interview too was like, what was the actual reality? Was it all of a sudden like Nepal was the freedom tech capital of the world? I had a feeling that wasn't the case, and I think
yeah.
you're sort of you're confirming that. On another level, do you feel like maybe some of the people who maybe now have begun to understand the importance of something like Bitchat or Bitcoin. Maybe they were introduced to it as a result of what happened. Do you think that this may be the beginning of like at least certain seeds being planted of like, hey, these are actually uncensorable technologies that we could use outside of protests, maybe without being too dramatic, but as like, some of the components of rebuilding Nepal. Do you think that there are at least maybe small groups starting to think along these lines at this point?
100%. So basically, when things like these happen, and like internet being blocked, you will find two type of people broadly. One who will say, okay, I will just use a VPN and I'll find a hack around it,
Got it.
and they will find ways to still keep doing it. And then the other set of people who will say, oh, we will revolt, we will go into the street, and we'll make sure the internet is
Oh,
restored. So,
okay.
so,
Interesting.
so there are these both class of people. I think in every society they exist, and the percentage varies, of course.
Yeah.
So for regardless of which class of people you belong to, um, the fact is loud and clear that the government can stop the internet. And tomorrow, if even if it's a different government, there might be a different issue. But a lot of people, especially the young generation, who are kind of internet native, who have never seen a world without internet, unlike maybe me and you, um, for them, for many of them, it's probably the first time that they have seen that, oh, something like this can happen.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's a big percentage of those people who will think about it, that what will I do if it happens next.
Yep.
And for some of them, the answer will be in technology, and they will probably read more about how to use a VPN, how to download Bitchat, how to use Bitcoin, and things like that. And for some of them, it will be more like, okay, what kind of activism do I get involved into if this happens again, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yep.
And for many, it will be a mix of these two. Like, you
Okay.
can actually do both. Even people who have been out in the street, they would also like to know, like, how to protect their identities. And hey, there's something called VPN, then, which can mask your IP and things like that. And overall, incidents like these will, I believe, will push everyone, not only in Nepal but all over the world, to think about what to do when things like this happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to talk about information, maybe going into and coming out of the country. This is a little less, I guess, freedom tech related, a little bit more conspiracy theory related, but there has been talk that I've heard from people here, at least, or things that I've sort of heard trickling out about this incident. So, in this region of the world, we saw revolutions in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, or at least protests, massive protests like we just saw in Nepal, maybe with different outcomes, but similar amount of public outrage. Some people say what we just saw in Nepal was because India has been in talks with China. I think about BRICS related things, and maybe this was the Western world sending a message like, "Hey, look what just happened to on your northern border. That could maybe happen in India as well." Is there any credence to this, you think? And the reason I ask is because it seemed like it would be hard to orchestrate that. Like the Nepo Kids movement that you discussed, like that whole issue seemed organic, but maybe it was meant to seem that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Curious as to your thoughts on this.
So, like, every time there's a conspiracy theory, there's some, like, correlation which people assume as causation. Um, and honestly speaking, I'm not qualified enough to know what the truth is.
Yeah.
But if you look at the sequence of events, so there was this big BRICS event happening in China, where Nepal's prime minister, ex-prime minister now, Oli, was also there. And he, it looks like BRICS was expanding, and there, uh, Modi, Putin, and Xi, the Chinese leader, they were all becoming friends, and a lot of people think that uh, this was not going well with the US.
Hmm.
So people have blamed the same CIA for things that happened in Bangladesh as well. And the similar story there, that Bangladesh previous government was getting cozier with China, and then they were somehow toppled. And similar story happened in Sri Lanka
Mm.
with Rajapaksa government, where they were in discussion with Chinese government about some debt issues in 2022, and then right after that, protest started. So a lot of correlation there. And right now in India, there's an interesting thing happening, and we will see how the next few months or weeks go. So first, there's an opposition leader in India named Rahul Gandhi. He's the key opposition figure, and for the last couple of months, he has been talking about election fraud, very similar to what happened in the US when Trump lost back in
20.
2020. So
Hmm.
something similar, not at that scale, of course, but
Okay.
he has been complaining about a few specific locations, that elections in these locations were rigged, and the voter list was manipulated, and people who
Mm.
were against the governments, their names were removed. And over the last few weeks and months, he has become a lot more vocal about it.
Mm.
And to counter him, now the spokesperson for the governments, they are claiming that Rahul Gandhi is being funded by foreign forces like the
Mm,
US to destabilize India, just like what happened in Nepal and Bangladesh. They want the same thing to happen in India, and that's why he's talking about the election fraud.
hmm.
Now, what's the reality? I mean, I don't know. But there is a big election coming up in India in the next few months and also next year. These are state elections, not the central election, including my state, which is going to happen in October.
Okay.
So, yeah, it will be interesting to see if something like this happens in India. I mean, I'm doubtful. India is a much more robust country just because it's so big. To create a big revolution, you really need a lot more firepower. The last time it happened was like maybe 12, 13 years ago, the anti-corruption movement, which was led by leader in Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal.
Hmm.
So that was the last time. Over the last 12 years, things have been very stable. And the central government right now is in a very strong position. So
Okay.
highly unlikely that something like this will happen in India. But yeah, the conspiracy theories, they exist, and the correlation exists for sure.
Okay.
uh, there is strong correlation about countries getting cozy with China, and then a regime change follows.
Yep. Okay. Understood. Don't want to go too far down that one, just so no, we're not that kind of podcast, but I appreciate the context there. Um, in your mind, as far as freedom tech adoption, let's say Bitcoin, something like Bitchat, maybe Nostr as well,
Mhm.
um, in Nepal, in India, maybe this broader region of the world, Southeast Asia,
Mhm.
what do you forecast? Is this catching on? So there was, I think yesterday, Marty Bent published an article on something like 85 million people in Vietnam will be there. They'll lose their bank account if they
Yeah.
don't go through some sort of facial recognition scan or something
Mhm.
like that, some sort of identity process. You know, these are the sorts of things that I think make people think twice about the systems that we live in, how much of our identity we need to expose, how much privacy we have or we don't have. Is this conversation around privacy, permissionlessness, all of the things that Freedom Tech exposes? And I'll leave out maybe savings because I know that in India, Bitcoin does have something of a footing. It's a
Mhm.
culture that also appreciates saving in gold, from what I understand. Not to stereotype, but I've been told that's the case.
Yeah.
But I've
Yeah.
also been told, yeah, from one of my coworkers that transacting with Bitcoin in India is not a thing. There's actually a really easy to use transaction system, a
Mhm.
digital transaction system. I forget the name offhand,
Yeah.
but
UPI.
my right, exactly, that's it. So my question though is more broadly speaking, is there any conversation around this other stuff starting privacy, censorship resistance, etc.?
Yeah. So this is a great question, and I have spent a lot of time thinking about these things, especially growing up in India and then coming to the US, having a preconceived impression of how the US will be based on what I read and like all these history of founding fathers and their ideologies and reading all
Yep.
that, and then coming here and discovering, okay, this looks slightly different. But
Tell it what's different. What's different? Go for it. Yeah.
I mean, this will be a separate comment from your question, but
Yeah.
the difference is like when I came to the US and especially studying at MIT and living in Boston, I especially on campus and even outside campus, I'll say a lot of people in the US don't understand the idea of freedom anymore, and they don't care about it anymore. I believe
Mm.
there's a
Please,
lot.
please keep going. Yeah, we want to hear this. Yeah.
So now, okay, this will be a long story. I don't know how much time we have,
We're
but
good.
I'll give you a very specific example to prove to explain my point. And this is when this is when I had graduated, but for some reason I was still living on campus at MIT, and this is when COVID, there were lockdowns, restrictions because of coronavirus pandemic, and this George Floyd case had happened,
Hmm.
and people were angry everywhere. There were protests, but because of the restrictions on campus, you couldn't protest, and gatherings were not allowed. So what MIT leadership decided to let people vent out their anger, they placed whiteboards in all the dorms and all the locations where students live, and they allowed people to write things on the whiteboard, and people were writing like, yeah, these things have to change, and all those things. And then there was a question on the board. One day I was walking in and I saw it said, what needs to change, how should we have done things differently to avoid something like this. And I wrote there that if the guy had a gun with him, it's more likely that he would be alive today, because the police who actually stepped on his neck, probably if they saw that he has a gun,
Mm,
probably wouldn't have come close to him, engaged from a distance. Maybe they might have shot him, but he had a chance to fight back,
interesting.
because
Yeah.
he had a gun in his hand. And you won't believe it how crazy people went against this comment. Like next morning I came and someone had written, really, question mark, question mark, question mark, are you crazy, is this real, are you kidding? And not only that, like a day after I came back again, and someone has actually erased that statement. They were so
Mm,
upset about it, and talk about freedom of speech and
right.
expression of your ideas, and someone actually came and erased that statement. They were so upset with that. So
Mm,
people just don't get gun rights. People don't believe in those things anymore. um, People really value the government and the power of the government. A lot of students supported the idea of free education and all those subsidies. So, which is not what I expected this country to be when I
mm,
came here. So
interesting.
that was a kind of a shock to me. But now going back to your original question and to answer
Please.
that,
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah. So you mentioned this thing in Vietnam where they want your um, facial ID or whatever to allow you to bank.
Yep.
You will be surprised to know this already happened in India. So India, there is something called Aadhaar card.
Mm,
To get an Aadhaar card, you need to give them your fingerprint, all 10 fingers, your eye scan, all of that. Then they issue
okay.
you an Aadhaar card, and then so this Aadhaar exercise started like 10, 15 years ago, and I was avoiding it. I didn't want to do it. I avoided it for as long as I could, till the point that the current government, Modi government, they made it mandatory for you to link your Aadhaar with your PAN card. So PAN card is what you need for a bank account. And so if you don't link it, your bank services will be stopped. So they went to that extent.
Mm,
At that point I had to give up, and okay, I said, okay, take it. I need a bank account. So it already happened in India, and you will be surprised that nobody cared.
interesting.
Nobody cared because people put so much faith in a, like a centralized authority. They think it's for their good, and
They're
they
good,
are
right?
doing something good, and everyone lined up to get an Aadhaar card. And there have been so many hacks and breaches already, where not your biometrics, but definitely your ID number, your name, your address. You can buy like millions of them on dark web today,
Wow.
in India. So nobody cared back in India about such things. So talking about like privacy, and even in India, if you talk about privacy, and a lot of people will say, I don't do anything wrong, why should I care?
Right.
Like, oh, you are so worried about privacy, what criminal things are you doing? So
Right.
they will assume that you are doing something wrong if you care about privacy. So there is a
Right.
very small fraction of population who actually cares about it,
Okay.
and that fraction is a lot larger in the US. Despite all the things I mentioned
Yeah.
about my experience here, despite the shock, there's still a lot of people. Like, people actually revolted against the mask mandate, and I found that so beautiful. And people are back in India, nobody understood, why are these people crazy? Why are they protesting? If the government is asking them to wear a mask, like,
Yeah.
it's a good thing, everyone should wear a mask. But nobody gets the point that it's not about wearing a mask, it's about the government forcing you to wear a mask. And that distinction is still not clear for a lot of people.
Okay.
Um, so 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 going back to like the point I was trying to make is that I don't think that a lot of people will all of a sudden start caring about privacy. And I think that fraction of population will always remain a small fraction of population. That's my
Okay.
guess.
So
Yeah.
even so in Nepal, the reality of like even people see a small percentage of people seeing the power of some of these tools, you don't think that now makes that populate that sample size grow? That's just going to be okay. Those were like the same people that heard about it to begin with. They're the same people
Yeah.
that might continue. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, also there is a factor of convenience, and
Yeah,
how, like, most privacy preserving tools are not as convenient to use
totally.
as non privacy. So you have there is a barrier, energy barrier you have to cross to get there.
People like
And
convenience, though. They
yeah,
really like
yeah,
convenience.
yeah,
Yeah. Interesting. I guess as a final question, so you helped put on the Freedom Tech Conference. By doing this sort of work, and again, Freedom Tech, including the conference was great. Everything from
mhm,
Bitcoin to Nostr to Tor. You know,
yeah,
what do you imagine the impact of this will be? I mean, what do you hope the impact of this sort of conference will be?
yeah. So I hope we continue with the theme. So again, the thing with the Bitcoin Club is it's a student-run club, and every year the students change, and there is a different agenda they want to drive home. We are trying to continue with stick to the theme of freedom tech,
Yep.
and do it again and again, year over year. The biggest thing is that the MIT community is very tech focused, and a lot of
Mm,
people do tech for the sake of tech. They just love it. They just love cryptography, and that's why they want to build it.
got it.
But even for those people, seeing the actual impact that it creates in the society, seeing that, and actually seeing that speaker right in front of you and interacting with them,
Yep.
that's something that was the biggest value that we created this year
Okay.
at the event.
Yeah.
And there were so many engineers or scientists who were in the space who came and told us that, yeah, I we didn't know it was this important. Like for
Mm,
someone actually, like the speaker who came from Venezuela, he talked about how he escaped Venezuela and brought his family here. The keynote speaker from he was from Kenya. He talked about similar experience. So all these experience actually, it shows that, yeah, this is technology, not just for the sake of technology.
right.
There is a real world application. People actually need it. Maybe not as much in the US or any developed society, but there is a lot of bad things happening in this world
Right.
everywhere, and someone needs to do something about it. It's still one planet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Appreciate that. Final thoughts. One, I want to say thank you to begin with. This was really helpful. It was not that I'm excited to hear that maybe Freedom Tech was less adopted than a lot of people thought, but it's always good to hear the reality on the ground.
yeah,
I tend to agree with you. It seems like some of this technology ends up getting used by a small percentage of the population. But I think to your point, to the point you made about, you did the math. We have about 1% of the younger Nepali population using something like BitChat. 50,000 people is still a lot, even if it is just
yeah,
1%. That's a tremendous impact to have on a group of people. So I think it's not necessarily important to just focus on the percentage, but the amount of people and the fact that there's anyone out there that would benefit from this technology or who understands the benefit of it. I think that to the point you made, especially to the technologists who create this, seeing and hearing that it has this impact, I would imagine that it will compel them to continue to iterate and create more technologies or better technology like this, to continue to empower those people who, as you said, the world is kind of a rough place in a lot of places, and these tools do get used in those places. Maybe not by everybody, but by those who truly need them, which is inspiring. But yeah, any final thoughts or anything to add?
yeah. I would just like to mention that the 50,000 number is the downloads that happened in those 2 days of the peak.
Yep.
It's not the total number. I don't know what the total number is.
Yep.
Maybe we already had another 100,000 users. But since it started in July, I doubt. But at least it shows that, yeah, a lot of people realize that this thing can be used, and they had it ready as a backup.
Yep.
So maybe we'll have to wait for the next revolution somewhere else
I
to
hope.
actually see it in action.
Yeah, I try not to wait for those things,
Yeah,
but yeah, no, just joking. Ideally, yeah, we
yeah,
want peace in the world, but yes, in the
yeah,
case that something like that happens,
yeah,
ideally, maybe some of the message from this spreading from Nepal to the rest of the world
yeah,
is something that will help prepare the next people that unfortunately
yeah,
have to
yeah,
deal with similar circumstances. So,
yeah. Absolutely.
um, Hash, really a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for doing your best to try to get me to speak with someone. Thank you for being the person that I ended up speaking with. And thank you for all the work that you do at MIT and the conference this year. Sincerely appreciated by myself. And I know many people out there who appreciate this technology.
And thanks to you, all of you at the Bitcoin Magazine. You guys have been doing a great job there. I hope you keep doing it, and hope to see you next year at the expo again.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to leave it at that. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll be back next week. Take it easy, everybody.